When Ed Koch became mayor of New York in January 1978, he inherited a city in disrepair, unable to borrow money, and seen as on the verge of bankruptcy. He knew that as mayor, he could not let that happen. With the help of Governor Hugh Carey and a financial plan based on federal loan guarantees that Congress approved in 1978, Mayor Koch and his team adopted a balanced budget a year ahead of schedule in 1981. In 2012 and 2013, honor students from the LaGuardia Community College met with former members of the Koch Administration to learn how they solved the fiscal crisis.
Now, when I came in to office in 1978, everybody who passed judgment on the city's finances thought we were going to go into bankruptcy, that there was no option.
The heads of the major banks were coming in to see the governor. The bankers walked in, the head of Citibank, Chase, and Morgan Bank, and they told the governor and me that they were no longer willing to underwrite the notes and bonds of the city of New York. And that was the beginning of the public fiscal crisis.
In the mid-70s, many of American cities were viewed as places of crisis where the best thing was to get out, and urban planners like myself were raising questions about what's the future of cities. It was a city that people spoke about evacuating, not revitalizing.
How was New York? New York was very disheartened, and people really questioned whether it could survive. An important piece that Ed did was to restore the spirit of the city. Again, that can-do attitude. He recognized that we were in peril, and yet he had a spirited determination that, in fact, the city could recover.
The roots of the fiscal crisis go back much deeper, even back to the 1950s, as there's a slow decline in manufacturing jobs in New York City and what often is called a white flight, where you saw much of the middle class of New York City leaving its boundaries, moving out to the suburbs.
The city had to try to find a new kind of bottom in terms of employment levels and then rebuild from there. From 1969 to about 1977, New York City lost about 600,000 private sector jobs. That's an enormous number. And it was the loss of those jobs that was really the immediate precipitating factor for the fiscal crisis. You lost all those tax revenues from the companies and the employees. You had more need for social programs.
The city doesn't have any money to cover its operating expenses, so payroll and just other expenses just that the city uses every single day.
Actually, a perfect example would be James Capolino discussing his experience when he first got into office, of the offices in despair, that even the general government offices were in disarray, you know.
So about the second week I'm there, I said, you know, I really ought to go around and see some city offices. So they organized this tour, and I'm going down this list, and I figured, you know, they put the bad shit at the bottom of the list. So after the first one, I said, we're going to start at the bottom, work our way up. Well, you would have literally thought that I asked them to undress in public. Everybody was like, huh? Literally, no windows, plywood, plastic over the windows. Literally, people were sitting at their desks with mufflers and earphones and gloves on, trying to type and talk on the phone because the heat was so screwed up.
Before I came in with Beam, where the federal government would give the city money to pay its bills on the basis that the city would return the money before the end of the year. Well, that doesn't help you. I mean, we didn't have any money. They weren't increasing the money.
Any plan which seeks to enable the city to get from month to month or from year to year, which does not provide the city with an opportunity to reform completely its existing fiscal problems, which are a legacy of a profligate past, assures, we now know empirically, that New York City will remain permanently excluded from public credit markets.
If New York City was not able to borrow money from the credit markets, now the next resort in which they had to seek out for this money was to ask for assistance from the federal government. So he had to go up against the banking committee in the Senate, which was chaired by Senator William Proxmire from Wisconsin. He had a reputation of not really easily giving government support to cities.
I guess early on, Senator Proxmire was cool and didn't really feel that the city needed these loan guarantees, and he was skeptical. And
well, the way I look at it is that New York can still make sharp cuts. I may be wrong. I've got some documentation as to where those cuts can be, but nevertheless, I think the cuts will be made. What you've just told this committee is that by the Congress not acting, you will be required to make reductions in spending, and if the Congress does act, you won't make reductions at least that deep. That's what you said. That's the result of it.
Right. We are now, and this is what I said at the opening, we are at the edge of a renaissance. Come to the city of New York. Talk with the people. There's a vitality. Talk to the business people. They say things are turning around. There is a change. That change will end if they say the federal government has turned its back on us.
Mr. Mayor, what you've said conjures up the fact that all of us know who travel, that there are enormous mausoleums to other civilizations all over the world. It can happen anywhere. I saw Newburgh, New York, literally boarded up, and my colleagues in New Jersey have seen Newark, New Jersey suffer the same fate. And all these gorgeous buildings on the Avenue of the Americas are only there because of the services you render.
I think the key to your request is the fact that you're not asking for a handout. I don't view it that way. You're asking to borrow, well, in effect, you're borrowing by means of the vehicle of a loan guarantee. And it's at a cost, it's a point greater than the going interest rate that the government otherwise gets. And so this is not a situation where the federal government loses money.
We did ultimately get the federal loan guarantees, and Ed's trip to Washington and working on his colleagues and their respect for him as a former member of Congress, I think was very important. I came to New York City as the budget director in September 1981, and only a week or two after I arrived, we completed our first sale of bonds, all on our own. No municipal assistance corporation, no federal guarantees. It was $75 million. Now that's really tiny, given the scale of the city and all its needs. And at that time, interest rates were really high. But that was failing to acknowledge what a big step that was for the cities.
If you did what I did at that time and went to the West Side Highway and drove up and down looking west to New Jersey, what you saw were large office buildings being constructed. And they were being constructed to house our jobs. I could look over there and see my competition. At that point, it wasn't Tennessee, China, India, Pakistan. It was New Jersey.
We put together a a business tax credit of so much per relocating employee. And we knew that we were not competitive in energy costs. So we put together the Energy Cost Savings Program, which said if you're in a new facility or a substantially renovated one, other than in Manhattan, south of 96th Street, your electricity costs your energy costs would be cut by 30%.
My parents actually, they opened up a business during the mid 1980s.
Good.
And actually, because of these tax breaks, their business flourished. And it was
kind of a business.
It was a belt manufacturing business.
Oh, where?
They started off in the city, and then they moved to Brooklyn.
At one point, it became too expensive to continue on in Manhattan. The taxes, the rent was exceedingly expensive. We had to pay the electricity, the gas. It became just overwhelming. There were so many incentives in Brooklyn, and the incentive was that we had 30% discount for small businesses on electricity, on the gas. The rents were so much cheaper. Little by little, we saw the Brooklyn develop. From an abandoned spaces, from empty empty buildings, industry started to move from Manhattan to Brooklyn. And it was awesome.
By the time the Koch administration had left office, the city was in a very different condition than it had been earlier. And you could see the foundation of greater economic growth that would happen in the 1990s and through today.
Fiscal stability is not only a balanced budget, and we are now in our 4th consecutive years of balanced budgets. Nobody believed that would happen. It is confidence. It is that the business community and the residential community say, we're going to stay in New York or we're going to come to New York.
So Mayor Koch actually got us out of that fiscal rut, that dark cloud, and New York was able to see an actual future, and that there is progress, and that there is potential again.
In high school, I attended this program called Studio in a School, and it really helped me realize that I wanted to continue to study art in college. And being part of Friends of Koch, we actually met Renee Michelle and Diane Coffey, and I realized that that program was actually partially funded by the private and public partnerships that were created during Koch's administration. It was pretty cool.
My plans were to study finance, and after that graduating with a bachelor's, go into the private sector and just pursuing a career in private equity and investment and bank. But that completely changed as I participated in the Friends of Koch initiative. One of the goals now is to be able to run for office here in New York City.
I've gotten to meet the mayor, Mayor Koch. I've gotten to learn under a filmmaker and create an amazing project that took months to create, and there's been a lot of ups and downs in between, a lot of smiles, and now I'm heading into the next phase of my journey, completely open to whatever the experience is, knowing that my experience at LaGuardia has prepared me fully for whatever it is that might come my way, and I'm very, very excited.